Elise and welcome back to My Cupcake Addiction. Today I'm going to show you the ultimate candy box cake. This is cake that looks like a box of candy, and the best part about it, you can customize it to include your favorite candies or the favorite candies of the person you're making it for. The things you'll need to make your candy cake: I've got some blocks of chocolate. Try to make them nice, relatively thin blocks because we want to be able to cut through them when they're on the sides of our cake. I've got a ton of different candies, so everything from little watermelon slices, pineapple candies, M&Ms, Skittles, gummy bears, you name it. I literally have all of my favorites. I've got some pink Pocky, some sprinkles, and then I've got a bunch of lollipops. So I've got one massive rainbow one and then a bunch of assorted colored small ones. I've got a single batch of my perfectly pineapple buttercream frosting. I will leave a link to that recipe down below. And I have 3 pre-made 8-inch by 6-inch by 1-inch high cake layers. For today's video, we're going to be using a hairdryer. This could be a first in cake decorating, but I'm going to show you a really cool technique that uses, funnily enough, your hairstyling tools. I have a serrated edge knife and just a shallow tray because we're going to make a lot of sprinkly mess here. Let's get started. So first up, we're going to separate our cake layers and stack them. So just a little bit of buttercream frosting on the bottom. Buttercream's pretty sweet, and there's a lot of sweet stuff going on in this cake. So I'm only going to do a really thin layer of frosting in between each of my cake layers. On goes our second layer and a little more frosting. And our last layer. Now for this one, I'm going to use these blocks of chocolate to essentially make the outsides of my box. So I want to size it up roughly so that my chocolate block is about the same length as my cake. Maybe just a little bit longer to allow for some of that frosting. So I'm just going to line up my block, and then I'm going to make a nice cut with a serrated edge knife and just trim off some of my cake so that it's the perfect size for one even block across the front. For my side panels, there's not going to be a block of chocolate that actually suits that size. So I'm going to trim my chocolate down so that I'm sort of losing my top square. So just size it up. You want your chocolate to always be just a couple of millimeters bigger than the size of your raw cake because we've got to allow for frosting. All right, now my cake's the right size. I'm just going to add more frosting on top, just a really thin coat. This will be my crumb coat. It's designed to catch any of those pesky little crumbs. And not that it really matters, I always do this out of habit, but we're going to be putting panels all over the top of this anyway, so it really doesn't matter if there's a couple of crumbs in our frosting. If you guys are following me on Facebook, you would have seen me doing some of the portions of this cake live. I've started to do Facebook live streams, so I showed anyone that tuned in when I went live last week or the week before how to make these panels and a couple of hints and tips and some troubleshooting of chocolate versus candy melts versus compound. So if you guys aren't following me on Facebook, you can if you want to see what I do live, see a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, and ask me questions if you have any. All right, there's our first rough frosted cake. That can kind of just sit off to the side. You don't need to chill it or anything. And we're gonna make some of our panels. For your chocolate shard, you're gonna need your sprinkles, your hairdryer, and your block of chocolate. Now my block of chocolate is face down, so my bricks are facing the alfoil, and it is sitting on a piece of alfoil in quite a shallow, wide tray, because we're gonna make some serious mess. I'm gonna put my hairdryer onto the medium heat setting and onto the low speed, and we're going to just heat the back of the chocolate until it just starts to get shiny or is a little bit tacky to touch. We definitely don't want to overheat the chocolate here. We don't want to melt the whole block. We're talking like 10 seconds, 15 max, depending on the heat of your hairdryer. You'll notice as I'm doing this, I'm actually moving the hairdryer all the way around, and I'm kind of favoring the middle because those edges are going to melt first. All right, it's just started to get shiny, and if I stick my finger into it, you can see there I'm leaving little fingerprints, so it's just starting to go tacky. So now you want to take a ton of sprinkles, and you sprinkle all over. Hence the tray. Make sure you don't discount those edges and also the ends so that we can cover absolutely everything. And then just gently press down. We want to stick the sprinkles into the chocolate. We don't want to crack the chocolate. Corners, edges, sides, everywhere. And then that is going into the fridge for about 5 or 10 minutes. We're going to let that melted portion completely set back up, and we're going to have ourselves a sprinkle block. So when you come back out of the fridge, you should just be able to let all of your sprinkles slide off your chocolate to reveal the amazing, gorgeous, fully sprinkled panel behind. So block of chocolate on one side and really cool sprinkled panel on the other. So once all 4 of your little blocks are ready, you want to take your cake, and I'm just going to frost up this side and this side. If you feel that buttercream, that hasn't been in the fridge and that has crusted. Very important here that you're only frosting just before you want to stick these on. Otherwise, you're going to end up trying to attach chocolate to dry buttercream, and it's just never going to stick. I don't want to put too much on here because I know my blocks are pretty close to size with my cake. And I'm gonna try and be neat about it, especially around those bottom edges. This doesn't have to be perfect because it's gonna be covered by chocolate. So I'm gonna take one of my blocks and square side in, or boring side in as I like to call it. Position it right in the middle so it's slightly overhanging on either side, and press it nice and flush against that frosting. On goes our next block. Press the two together. Now, you wanna just take your other blocks, and they should have been sitting out at room temperature for a while, so you don't want these cold fridge crack cold, and try not to handle too much around the outside edges because they've kind of got this nice little sprinkled line around them, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I'm just gonna line it up with my sides. I want this to nestle in between these two guys, so I'm gonna make a mark just here, which should give me the perfect sized shard. That way I'll know where I've got to cut. Now you can heat your knife here. I am going to cut very, very gently in several long strokes. So I've got a really sharp knife. Sometimes I also like to heat the knife up in some boiling water and then really just let it melt through. But I couldn't be bothered boiling the kettle, so I'm just gonna do this instead. Perfect. And then I'm gonna frost up my end and stick in my piece. Before I stick that one in, I'm just gonna take a little bit of frosting, and because I want my two ends to match that are both kind of sprinkled, and I've cut that one, I'm just gonna put a bit of frosting on the end and make them kind of match. There we go, disguised. And onto the end of the cake it goes. I'm gonna do the same thing for the other side. While your cake should be perfectly square, there's sometimes a chance that maybe it's not quite as perfect as you'd like it. So I like to make sure that I measure them each individually. This one here, I actually cut off like a whole piece and a little section. And this one here, I only need a whole piece. Obviously, my cake is not completely square. A little frosting to disguise my end. And then a little more frosting down this end of the cake. On goes my shard. We have a box made of chocolate and sprinkles and filled with cake. So far, I am loving what's going on here, but there is definitely more. Now we're on to the good part. We're going to frost the inside section now. So I haven't done this beforehand because again, this is sort of crusted buttercream and I want fresh buttercream. So I'm gonna use my offset spatula. You can also use the back of a spoon if you don't have an offset spatula. But seriously, these things, one of the handiest tools. They just help you kind of get into all of the little sides and edges. Now that all of my blocks are in place, I can frost nice and snugly up against them. This is also your chance to even out the top of the cake. If you've got some sprinkles in your frosting, don't worry about it. You're not gonna see them. Everything is gonna be covered in delicious candy. All right, again, it doesn't have to be neat, so don't spend too much time on it. You're gonna take your Pocky now, and we're gonna do two Pocky. And I picked pink because I thought it was just a cute color. They come in brown, green, all sorts of other colors. I'm just gonna roughly line them up, and then as Pocky is designed to do, I'm going to snap them. These are basically my little dividers. Once that's done, you want to divide with Pocky again your little box into 8 sections, so 4 across. Lay them all on first because it can be kind of hard to judge what halfway is until you've got them all lined up. Between the offcuts from the cake, the offcuts from the sprinkled chocolate blocks, and now the offcuts from the Pocky, we are not going to have to wait until we get to the party to get a pretty decent sampling of this cake. I've actually decided cutting my Pocky is the easier technique. Especially for these guys, if you use the scissors to cut them, just helps you get that perfect size. Who knew Pocky cut so easily? We're ready to add our candy and we're actually nearly done. I'm gonna start with my pineapples and they're gonna go in my little lower corner. So I'm gonna use the Pocky to just sort of slightly elevate the backs of my little pieces of candy, and I'm gonna try and position them nice and evenly in there so I can squeeze in as many as possible, but they're all kind of like contained in their little section. And then moving on to all of your other favorite candies. One of the things that I love about this cake is it doesn't really matter what the occasion is, who the birthday boy or girl is. It's gender neutral, it's age neutral. This is like an anything goes cake. Everyone has a favorite type of candy or a favorite chocolate. So it doesn't matter if this is for your mum's 60th or for your little boy or girl's first birthday. It's kind of the everything cake. Keep in mind here, I'm gonna try not to position my M&Ms and my Skittles too close to each other. I'm gonna try not to position my gummy babies and my little jelly tots too close to each other because I wanna make sure that I've got a good variety and there's not like 2 of the same candy nestled right next to each other. There is something about precision candy placement that makes me feel very relaxed. All of my candy is laid out and this looks like something you'd see in a high-end candy shop. Now, of course, this is gorgeous just as it is, but we can always take it one step further, can't we? Surely? So I'm gonna take my large lollipop. I don't wanna put it too close to this back wall because I don't want it to like fall backwards and drag the cake. It's kind of a heavy lollipop. So I'm gonna just put it in like an inch or so down to about there. And then I'm going to take some of my smaller lollipops, just kind of add them in, just to add some varying levels of height and some extra pops of color, because this cake needs more color. And we're done. This, for me, is pretty much the ultimate candy cake. If one of my friends picked out my favorite candies and made this for me, it would be the ultimate in cake personalization. Who's not going to love a cake with this much candy on top? If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.